Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on 2021 Planning for the Year Ahead. First of all, some introductions. I'm Sue Watson, the HR Operations Manager for HR Solutions, and I'll be helping to field the questions. Victoria is going to be our main presenter today. So Victoria's our HR Knowledge Manager, and she'll be leading all the useful information today. So we've got in the background a team who is our technical support. So if you do have any technical challenges, do message us and she will try and help you. So first of all, how to ask questions. We've had to mute you all because there's so many attending the webinar, but we do still encourage questions as we go through the process. So this is how you do it. In your panel, which should look something like this, there is a section called questions. If you type in your question and hit send, submit, it will send it through to us, and then we will have a look whether it's a technical question or whether it's to do with the webinar content, and then we'll deal with them appropriately. We'll probably fill the questions at the end of the webinar and work through it rather than do it at each section. We're also going to run some polls. We've got a few today to work through. So when we have a slide like this, you will know that we're about to ask a poll. And just a reminder that make sure that your screen is not in full screen mode if you want to participate in the polls. I'm now going to hand over to Victoria, who's going to take us through the webinar.
Thank you, Sue. Can you see my screen? Ah, here we go. Brilliant. And thank you, Sue, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Well, what a year it's been, and with 2020 nearing its close, in this webinar we will reflect on the challenges businesses have faced in 2020 and consider what we can do to plan for the year ahead. So before we begin, I would like to just run through today's agenda. So I will begin by reflecting on the challenging year that we have had and look forward to 2021. We'll take a look at what financial options are available to businesses that can help them as we progress in 2021. After which we will then consider the resource options that may be available to help businesses rebuild stronger next year and start that road of recovery. And we do, of course, have Brexit, and so there will be major implications of Brexit on from a people perspective. So I'm going to take you through how Brexit will not only impact on your existing workforce, but also how it may impact on your resource requirements and planning in 2021. And then I'll bring the webinar to a close by focusing on what our 2021 action planning may look like in order to help you achieve success through your people. But before we crack on with the webinar, we are going to run some introductory polls. So I'm just going to hand over to Sue, who can launch the polls for us.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. So just getting our first batch of polls. We have 2 questions in this section. So first of all, are you currently using the government financial support packages? It's just a simple yes or no for this one. We've nearly got all the responses in.
Okay.
So I'm just going to close that poll and share the results with you. There we go.
Okay.
So a significant number are, but also a very significant number aren't.
Oh, okay, so 62% aren't, okay, with 38% are receiving the government support. Okay, so that's interesting.
Right, let's share the next poll with you, which is, have you used or are you planning to use the extended furlough scheme? Okay, I'll
Okay.
close that poll and share the results.
Okay, so we've got 57% that aren't planning or using it, and 43% that are. Okay.
It's quite evenly balanced, that one, really, isn't
Yeah,
it? There's still a significant number using it, so
that's interesting. Yeah, and
yeah,
obviously we've got it for a few more further months. Okay.
yes, absolutely. Okay,
Brilliant, thank you. So
back over
back
to you.
on with the webinar.
Okay.
So we're going to begin just by reflecting back on 2020 and consider what 2021 may hold. So it's fair to say 2020 has been the most challenging year for businesses and employees, obviously not just from a work perspective, on a personal level too. We have seen uncertainty and turmoil in dealing with the pandemic. And in regards to unemployment, we've seen the pandemic lead to an employment level of 4.8%, and that's for the period of July through to September. And that is actually 0.9% higher than a year ago and 0.7% higher than the previous quarter, which was April to June. We've also seen redundancies. They've increased by 181,000, and that's looking at the period July through to September, and that actually is a record high. So we have seen an increase in the number of businesses also that are also going into insolvency. And according to the government's insolvency service for England and Wales, for the month of October alone, there were 856 insolvencies. So, you know, these statistics are quite staggering. With the insolvency figures of 856, actually it could have been significantly greater than what it was. And actually it has also been a decline compared to the same period in 2019, which is very interesting. But actually, when you think about it, the reason why, even though there are, you know, a high number of insolvencies, they have declined on the previous period in 2019, partly because of the financial support that we have had from the government, such as the furlough scheme and the various business grants. So actually they have helped greatly in keeping businesses to run. And, you know, obviously we can't prevent all redundancies, but, you know, keeping people in jobs for that little bit longer. We've also had it confirmed back in August, the UK's economy shrank by 20.4% between April and June compared to June to March. And so what that meant was that we were officially placed in a recession. And so for these many difficult reasons, businesses will need to rebuild, not just to remain in operation, but to become stronger and in order to continue to respond to the pandemic. You know, and a crucial part of doing so will be your planning and planning for 2021. And so whilst we leave behind a very disruptive and damaging year, and these figures do paint a very stark picture, we now have optimism for 2021, given that there is this vaccine and we saw it begin to get rolled out this week. And also there are several other vaccines that are continuing to be developed, and some of them, my understanding is, you know, they're quite advanced in their development stages. So there is, you know, positivity out there. And the vaccine rollout, you know, it will take many months. And so, you know, unfortunately, we will have to start 2021 still working in that COVID secure way. And also on top of that, come 1st of January 2021, we'll also be out of the Brexit transition period. And so we are going to have clarity on our position for how we trade with the EU moving forward. And obviously the breaking news from last night is that we expect to have that decision come through by end of Sunday. So for a lot of businesses, this will no doubt bring stability, just knowing where we are and where things stand. So we've got that obviously on the horizon too. And so with the significant changes with Brexit, you know, planning is still going to be vital for that year ahead. And so what we're going to do now over the next few sections is look at, you know, what we should be considering when planning for next year. And the first part of that is actually looking at the financial support that you could utilise as a business to help just keep the business going and staying afloat, and helping you to build for next year. The financial support, there's a wide range of government financial support available, and important to be mindful of that when you're planning for next year. The financial support can be broken down into your two areas: funds that can help you to continue paying your employees, and funds that can help businesses simply to continue operating. So we'll focus on how we look at paying employees. So we have the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, also known as furlough, and that's now been extended until the March 2021, the end of March that is. So that's going to be an important date to factor into your planning. And at present, the government are paying the 80% of your normal wages, with employers paying only the cost of national insurance and pension contributions. What we are expecting in January, though, is the government to revisit the terms of the furlough scheme. So factor this in as well to your planning, because it may be that when they undertake their review, that they start to ask employees to start contributing to the scheme. And obviously we don't know, it's very much dependent upon the economic circumstances of the UK, but it is important nonetheless to factor in. And if we think when the furlough scheme originally came about and revised over the recent months, you'll remember that around September, October, employers were being asked to contribute more. So whether they will do the same and whether they will be at these levels again, who knows, but just factor in that in January we should get a further update on furlough. And in terms of the statutory sick pay, you know, whilst there is a vaccine and many others continue to be, I guess, developed, we should consider in our planning the fact that we will still be living with COVID, and there will be therefore circumstances where employees continue to need to self-isolate. So from a real resource planning perspective, and that'll either be because they have symptoms or because they've been told by NHS test and trace. And of course, we've got legislation now that makes it illegal if an employee attempts to, you know, go to work whilst they should be self-isolating. And it's also illegal, you know, for employers knowingly to obviously allow employees to be working if they've been told to isolate in a location. So an employee who cannot work because of COVID may be entitled to SSP. And that's where they or somebody they live with has coronavirus symptoms or tested positive, where they have been told to self-isolate by test and trace, where somebody in their bubble has tested positive or told to self-isolate, or they've been advised by a doctor or healthcare professional to self-isolate before actually going into hospital or for surgery or procedure, which, you know, you've probably encountered some absences in regards to this, just normal non-COVID health issues, but people are still going to have to take time out before to self-isolate. Now, in terms of the SSP, I just wanted to clarify, because there had been some confusion around shielding, because back in the summer it was paused, and then as we got further into this second peak, there was a bit of confusion as to whether shielding existed or not. So just to clarify, that with shielding, you are able to use furlough if your employee is unable to work because they're clinically extremely vulnerable, or if they're unable to work because they have caring responsibilities resulting from COVID, such as your childcare. So I just wanted to flag that while we were talking about furlough and SSP and absences, etc. We then have funds available that will help you pay your employees under the Adult Social Care Infection Control Fund. Now, it is only specific to those businesses operating in adult social care by helping to reduce the need for staff movements between sites. So it is available to those who operate in residential settings as well as those who work out in the community. And the government expects that the grant is used to be spent on infection control measures. And the government have got a defined list of what they include, and that they will need to be in place until March 2021. Now, one example that they've given as to how this grant can be used is to uplift the pay of staff who are self-isolating and who ordinarily would have only received SSP. So they're wanting to ensure that those care workers, those that work in the adult social care, are still receiving normal pay, if you like, through SSP and this uplift through the grant. So that's a really important support function there. Are we okay still with sound? So if we look at other financial support, then the other aspect is around the support that's available to your businesses. So your loans, grants, and financial relief. So you have the coronavirus bounce back loan, and that's for small to medium sized businesses, and where they can get a loan for up to £50,000. Now the fees and interest will not need to be repaid for the 12 months, and for the first 12 months rather, but then when interest is paid, it is set at a 2.5%. And an important date for your planning is that the scheme is open for applications until the 31st of January 2021. That's currently as it is. Whether things change, no, we don't know, but as it stands, it's open until the 31st of January. We then have the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, and that's where you can access loans for either 3 or 6 years, it depending on the type of finance you're applying for. But again, that's open to applications up until the 31st of January 2021. So start considering whether these schemes are something that you're going to want to utilise next year, because obviously there's that deadline that's not too far away. We have a Coronavirus Future Fund, and that's about making available government convertible loans between the value of 125,000 and 5 million, and it's to innovative companies and who are subject to at least equal match funding from private investors. So it may be an option for those businesses who are relying on equity investment, who may not be able to access other grants, businesses, loans, etc., through the government. And again, with the others, the scheme is open to applications from the 31st of until the 31st of January. And then we have business rates relief. So for your retail, hospitality, leisure, and nurseries, for those who are of the Ofsted settings that provide childcare up to the age of 5, they don't have to pay business rates for 2020 to 21 tax year. So the local council automatically applies a discount. But again, if you do operate in that sector, then it's planning into your plans for next year the fact that, this will come to an end at the end of the tax year. And then a further, we've got quite a few types of loans and grants. So we've got the local restriction support grant for closed businesses. Now this is where it becomes, it's not really complicated, but the fact that we've got many systems in place or support avenues in place because we're now operating a tier system across the country. And so it's about tailoring that support. So this first one is about working with those businesses that have closed, such as your nightclubs, dance halls, adult entertainment businesses. And it's for those who have been required to close since March and are remaining closed. And so they may be eligible to the local restriction support grant. It's a cash grant for each 14-day period, and it's available from the 1st of November for businesses. You then have the local restrictions, but for open businesses, so those operating in tier 2 and tier 3, and this is where the grant can be available where you've been severely impacted due to COVID. It's a cash grant again for each 14-day period, and it's for the local council in this scenario to determine the eligibility criteria of the grants. But my understanding from the government is their expectation that they've set is that those grants are targeting hospitality, hotel, bed and breakfast, etc. We then have local restriction support grant for closed businesses operating in tier 2 and 3. And again, it's those that are required to close. This is the closed one, so they're having to close because of COVID. And again, it's a cash grant, and there'll be eligibility criteria. And then there's additional restrictions grants, which supports closed businesses that do not directly pay business rates, as well as those that do not have to close, but nevertheless they are still impacted. And each local council determines which businesses to target and the amount that's to be awarded. And then finally, we have the VAT deferral new payment scheme. So a new payment VAT payment scheme will come into operation from early 2021, and that will allow employers to pay VAT that was deferred in the period 20th of March through to the 30th of June. And so it will enable businesses to pay small monthly instalments over a period of up to 11 months interest-free, but all outstanding payments will need to be due by 31st of March 2022. So this is obviously something that you might want to factor in and consider as to how you wish to pay this. Alternatively, a business can pay the full amount by the end of March next year. So these are just things to consider about how you fund yourself going into 2021. And of course, moving into the next section is about how you resource yourselves and what options you've got for next year. So planning your structure and your resource need for 2021 is going to be vital. So now's the time, if you've not already done so, to look at whether your business is structured appropriately to face the continued challenges. There's also hoped at this time that staff attrition is avoided or kept to a minimum, especially for the businesses who rely on EU nationals, such as your care sector, the hospitality sector, because rules on recruiting are changing, which I will come on to later in the webinar. But I'm going to just talk through some options available to make sure that you've got the right resource in the right place in order for you to build your business next year. And so, as I said a moment ago, restructuring and redundancy, the priority will really be to assess whether your business is structured correctly and can you respond to the pandemic and the new challenges that face you next year. Unfortunately, restructuring of how businesses operate because of the pandemic will be vital for many and obviously lead to a real threat of redundancies. We know that redundancies have already increased by 181,000, and we've also seen an increase in the number of, we've seen a high number of insolvencies. So given furlough may change in January and is ending in March, we suspect these may be critical points for businesses where perhaps we may see more redundancy programs occurring again. They're almost like trigger points. So if you do anticipate a need for a change program, consider these two timeframes when you're planning and how it links all together. And remember, furlough is about keeping employees employed for longer if you can and keeping that employment going. If it is evident that the business does need to change how it operates, whether it's for financial reasons or to adapt to changing customer requirements, then developing a good solid business case will be vital when beginning that change program. And having a solid business case can not only help you manage a fair process, but it can actually also have a significant impact on how employees react to the news. And if they can understand and appreciate the reasons for the proposed change, they're more likely to support the business. And additionally, in the absence of a good business case, employees may not be convinced of the genuine reasons for redundancies, and so more likely to challenge the process at all stages, which could then see employment tribunal claims being made. So entering a change program is always very difficult, but if it protects the business longer term, and it may unfortunately be necessary for the survival of the company, it may obviously be needed in order to protect as many jobs as possible for as long as possible. And so, moving on then to your resource options, once you've considered your structure and if you're set up in the right way, then consider whether actually using apprenticeships or placements under the Kickstart scheme could add value and bring benefits to your business. But remember, using the Kickstart scheme mustn't be used to replace a role that would ordinarily have been occupied by an employee or contractor. But nevertheless, apprenticeships and Kickstart schemes, they do bring many benefits. They're simple and cost-effective recruitment processes. You can tailor on-the-job training that suits your organisation's requirements. It's securing, future business planning by investing in the future workforce, and it provides an opportunity to partner with local communities and training providers. And of course, there's also funding from the government. We have the government paying for the creation of jobs under the Kickstart scheme, as well as awarding businesses for taking on apprenticeships. Now, the Kickstart scheme does focus on helping young people find employment, and so it does directly create high quality jobs for young people. And it was launched back in August time, and we know that as of the 12th of November, 19,000 job placements had been created for young people under that scheme, which is amazing. And there was also, obviously, as part of the jobs announcement, that the government was boosting financial support for apprenticeships, and so paying businesses more to hire. And they talked about contributing to employers £2,000 for each new apprentice they hire under the age of 25, and 1,500 for those that they hire who are over the age of 25. So have a think about your resource planning from the perspective of utilising some of these government schemes, because they may actually really work for your business. And then, of course, moving on to flexible working, and as part of resource planning and looking at the organisation structure, consider how flexible working might actually help you rebuild your working environment. And we've had the statutory right to ask for flexible working for many years, but supporting a flexible working environment now to help your business can be beneficial. So it can give you a better utilisation of workers. The arrangements aren't always just one-sided. Flexibility can work both ways. So with work being done to meet the demands of the job, and then time off being taken in those quieter periods. It's also shown to lead to enhanced job satisfaction, and there was data that showed 40% of SMEs believe the main benefit of flexible working increased employee satisfaction. And of course, we know that there is links to increased productivity, and statistics do show that a happy workforce is more productive. And probably one of the most positive benefits is actually it's giving businesses access to a wider recruitment pool. So if you think about it, flexible working is an overwhelming attraction and can sometimes be more of a pool than money, but it can attract a wider range of candidates for you who otherwise would have not been considering applying for your business. So if you think about working parents, women that are on maternity leave and wanted to get back into their careers, people that with disabilities that may struggle working full-time and may be better with working part-time, you're opening up the having a more diverse workforce, which is a really, really strong positive. And of course, it helps with better timekeeping. If people can fit their working time around outside commitments, your school run, the rush hour traffic, their ability to arrive on time may be enhanced, and you'll benefit from their presence rather than having to manage absence and lateness, etc., which can be a burden for businesses having to manage. And of course, it can bring lower costs for organisations having some form of flexible working. Time previously spent attending appointments, taking long lunch hours is now taken in employees' own time. If people want to bank up worked hours, people might actually prefer to take time off in lieu than overtime. So there are many, many benefits to flexible working, and this is one thing that really should be considered when you're looking at how you plan for next year. And of course, types of flexible working, your traditional part-time working, condensed hours, which is essentially if somebody normally works 5 days, they might work their hours over a 4-day period instead. So they're condensing it, so they've got that more time at home. Term time, which is absolutely a massive benefit for working parents. And annualized hours, so for example, you might not be able to commit to or understand what your work level is going to be for the next 12 months because of the pandemic. But using an annualized contract, for example, to bring somebody in, you could work it in a way where they work during the peak periods and then they're not at work during the quiet periods. So it's thinking creatively and out the box. And of course, we've got job share and working from home. You could consider a 4-day working week, which is probably a novel approach, and we have seen talk about it over the summer about whether a 4-day working week across the UK would help the UK in its recovery from the pandemic, and a number of cross-party MPs wrote to the Chancellor asking to consider it. And as the name suggests, it essentially is where you're working full time for 4 days, but you have your 3 days off. And of course, that's prorated accordingly if you're a part-time employee. But essentially, business operate over 4 days, not your 5. And I guess it is a concept that's radical, and it might very well be unlikely, but it's nonetheless something to consider if it perhaps may work for your business as part of you rebuilding, move to a 4-day working week. It's one there to consider. However, obviously it comes with caution because it will be a fundamental change to how the business operates. And so the practical implementation is likely to be challenging, especially to small businesses who may not have a dedicated HR function to help them navigate through that change. But so it is a very major change for employees and businesses. And reducing a business's operating hours will be a fundamental change to the employment contract. Some clients, some organisations already have flexibility clauses within their contracts that allow them to make changes and consult, but there are still some businesses who don't have flexibility contracts in their contracts of clauses in their contracts of employment, and so it takes a more delicate approach to seek that mutual consent. And there will obviously be risks with it, as with anything. The legal ramifications could be significant if not handled carefully or sensitively, or through a fair process. But nonetheless, it is something that if you really think that is going to help the business to survive as opposed to close, then consider, see how it may work. And of course, we're going to find out more by the end of the week about Brexit. But what we do know is that regardless of what's being negotiated from a trade deal perspective, we know from a people management perspective our position on recruitment and the impact of it on our existing workforce who may be EU nationals. So I think now's a good time to start a poll. We've got a number of questions in here, so I'm going to ask Sue to kindly open up the poll for us and to see focus on Brexit.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. So I'm just going to launch our first one. We've got three polls here. So the first one is, have you started planning for Brexit? I think nearly everybody's voted now. So okay. I'm going to close that poll and share the results with you. There we go. That's a pretty even split again, isn't it?
Yeah. So 54% have started planning for Brexit, 46% haven't. And I guess, with Brexit, there's, even now with however many days to go, not many, less than a month, well, yeah, a couple of weeks, we still really don't know our position from a trade perspective, do we? And so, you can understand how it's like, where do you start with your planning? But nevertheless, there is still a need to start thinking about how it may impact. And as I said earlier at the start, Sunday's the deadline is what they're telling us, well, we're going to know. And I think having that position made clear next week will give businesses many stability. But I think just knowing what's happening, but planning is going to be key, absolutely key. And, we would urge businesses to start doing so. And, I'm going to come on now to talk about how it may impact from a people perspective. So hopefully you'll have some things to take away to help in that planning.
In that section, yeah. So I'm just going to hide this one and let's share the next one, which is to do with recruitment or employment, sorry, of EU nationals. So do you currently employ EU nationals or recruit from outside the UK? This one's going to be a much wider gap.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think everybody's voted. So let's close that one and share the results.
Okay, so 70% currently employ EU nationals or recruit from outside of the UK. Okay, and 30% don't. Okay.
So it's a
Oh,
big
that's
impact
interesting. Yeah.
on everybody, the next section actually. So I'm going to
Yeah.
hide that. Let's ask the last one, which is linked with this. And does your organisation hold a sponsor license? If we compare this percentage with the last one,
Yeah.
as it's going to significantly impact a lot of our audience. So I'm just going to close and share this one with you.
So this is interesting. So 70%, 76% don't hold a sponsor license, some 24% do. And remind me again, Sue, of the previous result of the other question. How many employ EU nationals will recruit?
It
What was that?
was, until I hide this, I just get there so I can check for you.
It's about
60.
60.
It was 70%. Yeah, doing
70.
currently employ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. So, is that our last poll as well in this section?
That's put in this section, yeah. So I
Yes.
think it's either that everybody's fortunate and all their EU nationals are have got settled status and they've all,
Mm,
but if they haven't, then I think the next section might be quite interesting for them. So I'll hand
yes.
back to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And so we're going to be talking about, first of all, the impact of Brexit on your employee retention. So, okay, so we already know how Brexit will impact people both in terms of those currently working in the UK as well as those wishing to come in from next year. So planning is going to be absolutely key for you. And in terms of your existing workforce, all current EU national employees in the UK must apply to the EU settlement scheme if they wish to continue working in the UK after Brexit. So that's a really important piece for those businesses that already employ EU nationals. Now, your EU nationals will have until 30th of June next year to apply to the scheme, but they must be in this country by the 31st of December. If they have not applied by the 30th of June, they will need a visa to work in the UK and be sponsored. Otherwise, working in the UK will be unlawful. So this is a major change as a result of Brexit. So you've got current employees who are EU nationals. If they're going to wish to continue working in the UK, then they must be applying for that EU settlement scheme. Now, from an employment perspective, you can't force employees to be applying, but because essentially it's their choice, it's their right to decide what they want to do, whether they wish to go back to their home country or whether they want to carry on living and working in the UK. But what could be and very well is reasonable as an employer, if you think about it, you're going to have to plan from a resource perspective and anticipate any potential attrition. So it is reasonable to ask your employees, what their situation is, just so that you know what's happening. Are they intending to apply or not? Because you need to do a certain amount of planning. But in terms of your plan for 2021, then the key dates are that your EU nationals who work for you, EU nationals need to be in the country by the 31st of December in order to qualify for applying, and then they've got until the 30th of June to apply. After that, they need a visa, which I'll come on to shortly. Now, in terms of whether you require your employees to travel to the UK for business, then you also need to be mindful of what happens as a result of Brexit. So British citizens will need a visa to live and work anywhere in the UK, in the EU, except for Ireland. Now, Irish citizens are free to live and work in the UK and EU. They get, I guess, the best of, both worlds there. But in terms of, British citizens, they need that visa. Now, if you have employees who travel to Europe for business, then you need to start planning for how Brexit will affect their travel next year. So EU countries have their own time limits for visits where no visas are required. So there's a certain amount of time where somebody can go over without needing a visa. Each European country has their own different time scale. So what's going to be really important is if you do have regular travel to EU countries as part of your business, then understand of those countries that you operate or work in, then understand what the visa requirements are and at what point. And then in terms of the British passport, that's going to need to be valid for at least 6 months when somebody is travelling. So there is impact on your existing employees and things you need to be planning for and exploring further for next year. Now, the other side of your resource planning, if you like, and impact is around how Brexit will impact you recruiting, your resourcing. So this is going to be really significant, especially to those sectors who rely heavily on EU nationals, so your care sector, your hospitality sector. We know the free movement of people ends the 31st of December. And so from the 1st of January, we'll have a new Australian-style points-based system to deal with, immigration. So if a person wishes to come to the UK for the first time to work, they will require that visa, and it will be through the new points-based system that they apply. In order to recruit from outside of the UK, an employer must hold a sponsor license. And this is going to be key. And, a percentage of you, 28% of you, I think, said you don't hold the sponsor license. So if you are, obviously, those organisations that do recruit from outside the UK, that's going to be a priority for you to work on getting. It will apply to both EU and non-EU nationals, so everybody's going to be treated equally. That was one of the main purposes of the scheme, and also to simplify the whole piece of immigration. And in terms of right to work checks, this is where it's a little bit of an interesting point, in that the government have allowed a transition period to be able to use a new points-based system. And so employers will be given 6 months to continue to accept passports and national identity cards of EU nationals in the usual way as evidence of their right to work in the UK. So you've got that 6-month grace period. And EU nationals may alternatively opt to provide their evidence through the online right to work check-in service. And so when using that method, the employer will need to provide you with a share code, either directly themselves or via the online service. And they can do that until the 30th of June. So it is a bit of an odd one, because if you arrive, because essentially what they're saying is you need a visa from the 1st of January, but equally, employers are given 6 months grace period to continue checking the usual right to work documentation of EU nationals. I can't explain it, can't answer it, because there is no understanding or explanation of it. It's just one of those things. And I think the easiest thing to sort of think about when you're planning is that, you've got your existing workforce, identify out of that who is an EU national, understand what the potential risk is to attrition for next year, and understand, so they'll need to go through the EU settlement scheme. And then from next year, when you're looking to recruit into roles and the applicants from the outside of the UK, then it's around the visa route. So there's a major change to recruitment. And as I said a moment ago, those sectors that rely heavily on the EU nationals will be, really impacted by this. The points-based system uses characteristics in terms of awarding points, and they look at the qualifications, salary level of the role that's being offered, and whether the job role is in shortage. There will be several routes under the points-based system where somebody can come through to the UK, and the two most common ones likely to be seen will be a skilled worker visa route, where they'll need 70 points, and the intra-company transfer route. So if you have another subsidiary in an EU country, there'll be an intra-company transfer visa. The new system uses the same principles currently used for Tier 2 of the existing immigration rules. So if you're already familiar with that, it's going to be very, very similar. It just means that you have to use it for EU nationals now, not just those from outside of the EU. So those of you who do not recruit from outside of the EU, then it's going to be a change for you. We expect the new way of recruiting from outside of the UK will have a huge change for recruitment. So employers must hold that sponsor licence that I spoke about if they wish to recruit from outside the UK. And we will find that the UK selection pool will be significantly reduced, by no longer having access to the millions of people from across Europe. There'll also be increased recruitment costs, as it will cost to become a sponsor, and there'll also be immigration fees too associated with the visa process. However, the new system is aimed at making it a much simpler, easier process to manage, and it's also about equality and treating everybody the same regardless of which country they're coming from, whether they're coming from an EU country or outside of the UK. And the government will be relaxing some of the rules, and one of the big changes is that they're going to be abolishing the resident labour market test. So for those of you that already recruit from outside of the EU, you have to demonstrate through the labour market test that you can't find an applicant from within the UK domestically. That's going to be abolished. And it's also just worth adding that we are hoping that there's going to be some further practical guidance around the implementation of this scheme. There is guidance out there at the moment, but in terms of the practicality side of it, then we're hoping to get something on that. Now, what I've added here on this slide is to link in with your planning key dates. So October the 22nd, that's when we had the new immigration rules published, all 514 pages, so a little bit of light reading there. But essentially, it's just letting you know that's when the new rules came into place from. And then on the 1st of December, we have the skilled worker route that opens. So essentially, as I said a moment ago, I suspect the two main avenues into working into the UK next year will be through your skilled worker route or through your intra-company transfer. So applicants now can already start applying for the skilled worker route. 31st December, the free movement ends, and so from the 1st of January, visas will be required to work. And your 30th of June is a biggie if you employ existing EU nationals, in that their EU settlement deadline is the 30th of June. Now, we're going to just do our final couple of polls before we move on to actually action planning and looking at that. So over to you, Sue, with the polls.
Okay, let's launch the first one, which is, what do you see as your biggest 2021 challenge? So there may all be a challenge, but just choose your biggest. Okay, I think nearly there with all the voting. Oh, a few more coming in now. Little splurge. Okay, let's close that and share the results with you.
Okay.
There you go.
So 48% resource challenges, and then followed by 33 with your current structure. Okay. May not be set up right for the future and recruiting. Okay.
Okay, let's share the last poll for this webinar, which is, have you started your 2021 action planning? And this is slightly different to the earlier one, I think. Okay, I think enough people are voting now. There we go. Let's share that. That's a healthy sign.
Yeah, okay, so 60% yes, that's brilliant. 40% no. Okay, so I'll come on to talk about action planning in the next section. I think that's all our polls, is it, Sue?
Yeah, that's all for now. Yeah,
brilliant.
I'll hand back to you.
Thank you. So this is the final part of the webinar, and I really appreciate you still being with us. It's a few minutes to go to 11, so this is the final section. So if you could bear with others, that would be great. So action planning. We would recommend several things to help you get ready. So I've said on this webinar about reviewing your organisation structure. That's going to be key, you know, to face the year ahead. So is it still fit for purpose? So consider things like whether you're set up to meet the needs of the business. Do you have sufficient flexibility within your workforce to be able to respond to the pandemic? Do you have the right skills in place? And you know, do you anticipate needing to recruit from outside the UK? You know, an overview and a review of your structure is going to be really vital, because then that can help you pinpoint what action steps you need to take and how to prioritise. And so depending on that review, we would recommend developing a people plan on how you can be successful in 2021 through your people. And that's, as I say, regardless of the outcome of your review. And, you know, think about, do you need to implement a change management program and therefore look to carry out a restructure or possible redundancies? You know, and I spoke about January and March next year possibly being two periods in the year that may trigger, because obviously the furlough scheme ending, but also may change in that January, who knows? But so just bear that in mind in terms of change management. And if you are expecting to recruit from outside of the UK, and you don't have a sponsor license, apply sooner rather than later. Probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was, I think, something like 30,000 applications sitting in the system, you know, and you know, there's going to be probably a backlog, so it's going to take time. So you're better getting your license sooner rather than later, you know, because of the huge demand that's going to be put on the Home Office with all these applications. And then start discussing with your recruitment teams if you expect to recruit from outside the UK, and consider whether your roles will be classed as a skilled worker. So there's a defined list. And so if you feel that you are going to be needing to recruit from outside the UK, then it has to align to the visa requirements. And the skilled worker route, for example, is one way to come in with a visa. But there are certain eligibility criteria in terms of salary and the type of job. Now, I mentioned in recruitment costs, there will be an increase to them because of recruiting changes. So, you know, you have to pay to become a sponsor, you have to pay immigration fees, there's all sorts of fees associated. So you need to be budgeting for that if you do typically recruit from outside of the UK. And monitor. Now, when I say monitor your employees, it's about just having that understanding whether they're applying for the EU settlement. It's not to sort of regularly keep asking them, you know, what they're doing, how's it going, but it's just really to start a conversation early on. You know, we understand this is happening. Obviously, we need to be able to prepare and understand our situation. What are your intentions? And, you know, just keep an eye on that behind the scenes. And then plan for British employees who will need to travel to the EU next year to establish if they're going to need that visa. Just to do investigate those countries that perhaps you operate or go to for work. Have a look to see what their visa requirements are going to be, and obviously make sure the employee has at least 6 months on their passport. And then look at what type of contract is appropriate for when you're recruiting next year. So I touched on annualized contracts earlier. You know, so if you know that you've got a role that you need to fill, a new vacancy, but you can't quite commit to just you know, an open-ended contract, or what we used to call as a permanent contract, you know, think about whether you bring somebody in on a fixed term contract, because you know, you can't ultimately commit too far ahead. You know, that's wise and sensible resource planning. Or if you suspect that you have highs and lows of work activity through a year, so could you use your annualized contracts to manage resource better? Because if you have, for example, again, one of these open-ended contracts, and you have you know, months of quiet periods, and then all of a sudden it gets busy, you know, what are they doing during those quiet periods? So do think about the types of contract that you bring your new recruits in, and also whether you look to buy in services. So, you know, IT, HR, etc., you know, catering, or, you know, whatever, you could look to see if there's cost efficiencies through those ways of resourcing your business next year. and look at, do you need to adopt a more flexible workforce? You know, we spoke about this as well in the many benefits that it can bring. And actually, because we're still going through a period of uncertainty and we don't know really how what the end looks like or when the end is going to be, actually, can you make the best use of flexible working and having that flexible workforce? And upskilling, so you know, can you cross skill your employees so that actually you've got resource you can move around if you need to, just during this period where you're trying to rebuild and refocus. And then I just wanted to let you know, in terms of your planning, to also plan into your schedule around, you know, join us for our next webinar next month, where actually we're going to be looking about how we consider creating a people plan going into next year. You know, what does that look like? How can you achieve success through your people? So that's our next month's webinar. So I know everybody's busy and we've got obviously Brexit and the pandemic, but it would be really great to have you on board and listen to our next webinar with some guidance on that next month. And I think that is the final poll. We haven't got any more polls, have we, Sue?
We haven't got any more, no. I think we moved them forward.
So it's over really to any questions. I'm conscious of time, so I don't know how you want to do it, Sue.
Just one question I think we've got time for.
Yep.
Otherwise, if there's any others, if you have any others, just message us and we will come back to you direct. So just think it might be useful to clarify, as we've had a question about what happens if employees don't apply for the EU settlement scheme. So really just to make sure everybody's clear on this, that the risk if they don't.
Okay, so they can't be employed after the 30th of June, so from the 1st of July, if you like. So they've got until the 30th of June to apply, and you can carry on employing them while they're going through their own EU settlement application process. But you've then got this period, you know, from the 1st of July onwards, they either need to have their pre-settled or settled status or have a visa. If they don't have any of those, then it'll be unlawful to continue employing them.
Yeah.
Which will be interesting, I suppose, and the challenges that will bring, because things like, well, what happens if they're going through the process but it's not yet received as at the 30th of June and all things like that. So I think we are waiting, and as I said, hoping to get more guidance, and I think as we work through Brexit and the coming weeks and months, you know, we'll start understanding more around this immigration and the transition after the 30th of June and the 1st of July period, but essentially it's unlawful.
Thank you. I think it's useful just to make that really clear, because there is action everybody will need to take if that's the case. And obviously now to identify anybody who's potentially at risk to them. Okay, thank you, Victoria. I think we'll conclude the questions there. And say if you do have anything afterwards, do message us and we'll come back to you direct. So just to conclude, just to let you know, those of you who are regulars with the webinars will see we've suddenly uploaded a significant number. We've put our next quarter's webinar program up. So we have, continuing on from today's webinar, we're looking at the people plan, so helping you to create one in January. We then, all those of you who participated in our survey will have had a copy of the survey, or will shortly if you haven't had it already, and we are presenting the findings from that in January as well. Then we're going to move on to looking at some interesting cases that have come through, and hopefully by then we'll also have some more information on employment law impacts of Brexit, when we finally know whether we're coming out with or without a deal, as that has some impact on what happens next. And then we are doing a webinar with Improve, which is our e-learning partner, and looking at employee development, which is an outcome from the SME survey that we've done. And then it goes on. We are looking at the IR35. Yes, that is still, at the moment, it is still going to happen from this April, next April, sorry. It was postponed from this year. So we're going to revisit that just to make sure everybody's ready for it. and then we're going to look at absence management, how to deal with mental health absences. I think there's a slight typo on the date there that we need to revisit. And data and GDPR, so the compliance and the implications for that after Brexit, as there will be some changes needed to enable data to flow in and out of Europe post-Brexit. So that's their programme at the moment. If the government introduce any more schemes or change the rules, or there are any developments, we will slot them in through the programme as needed, and as required, and as we get sufficient information. So as always, we do try and keep you ahead of the game as far as we can. So let us know if there's anything in particular you would like us to cover that we're not covering. And just another toolkit available to you. We have some free audits. There's a Brexit, there's a GDPR and an HR risk audit, as well as a COVID self-assessment. The Brexit audit has been reviewed and updated in the last few days and has just been made live again. So if you've conducted one before, you may be interested in looking at a newly refreshed one. And you get an instant report as soon as you submit your last answer, and you press the button to complete it. You will receive an option to download a PDF copy of the report, the output from it. So it is fairly instant. Just a reminder for those of you who are not already a client of ours, that we do offer some retained support, which is regular, ongoing. We work with HR people as well as line managers or owner managers, so we can give you kind of an extended resource or be a sounding board for you. So yeah, just let us know if you're interested. We also offer a lot of free resources through our resources page. There's a link there for you. Health and safety as well as HR. We have a health and safety division as well. And that we have been running and are looking at our 2021 programme of essential health and safety at work training courses. So if you are interested, please do let us know, or look at the link on our website. And finally, if you're not already a subscriber to our newsletter, there's a link for you to sign up to help keep you in the loop. And finally, we just wanted to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from all of us here at HR Solutions, to all of our regular followers, and I hope that next year, albeit challenging for all of us, is successful. And as I said before, if you've got any further questions, do contact us, submit us your feedback. If you've got any, good or bad, or any suggestions for future topics. And finally, thank you. Thank you to you all for attending. Thank you to Victoria for a very interesting and informative webinar. And we hope to see you all soon in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.